You're watching Global Toronto. This is Global News at 5:30.
Thank you for joining us. Far as away tonight, I'm Alan Carter. The Ontario College's teacher dispute has moved from the picket line now to the floor of the Ontario legislature. Everyone there knows that the Liberal government's back-to-work legislation will be passed, but the NDP is not making it easy. So when will students be back in class? Well, Shalima Maharaj is at Queen's Park. And where do things stand tonight, Shalima?
Well, good evening, Alan. Right now things are very quiet, but it was frenzy of activity a little bit earlier on today when this was raised at Queen's Park. Now, the legislature will now sit through the weekend. It is official to be able to hash out this bill that would effectively end the strike that has gone on for about 5 weeks now. There was essentially no debate, and that is what's going to be happening throughout the course of the weekend, and then a vote, and that is expected on Sunday. So what we do know is that this bill is going to be hashed out. After today's sitting, there was some very heated exchanges. We did have some comment from Advanced Education Minister Deb Matthews, but also some comment from the NDP, Andrea Horvath.
The students have been out for 5 weeks. They are very close to losing the semester. They need to get back. They need to get back immediately. We had a path, a clear path, to get to schools, classes being resuming on Monday. The NDP are blocking that effort, and I think they owe an explanation to students.
I don't know why Kathleen Wynne waited so long to get involved in this. She certainly had the authority to get involved earlier, but here we are, and it's my job to review legislation. I mean, nobody would sign a contract without even looking at it. Nobody would buy a car from a used car salesman, as was said earlier by someone else, without reviewing what that car looked like. I needed to look at the legislation.
Needless to say, this has been quite a week, but here's the answer to that question that we know that the students have been waiting for. So we talked to, of course, Advanced Education Minister Deb Matthews about that timeline, and she says that the Faculty Association says that they need about 24 hours after that legislation is put into place to be able to be ready for the students to come back. So rather than Monday, which is what was hoped for, they're looking at more than likely Tuesday when those students will be able to head back to class. Alan?
All right, Shalima, and Andrea Horvath will join us live in about a half hour's time.
You're watching Global Toronto. This is Global News at 6.
Well, the picket signs are down, but Ontario College faculty are still officially on strike tonight. An attempt to pass back-to-work legislation at Queen's Park did not make it through today. So where does that leave 500,000 students who have already lost 5 weeks of instruction? Our coverage begins tonight with Shalima Maharaj live at Queen's Park. Shalima.
All right, well, what we know right now is that Andrea Horvath herself had said that this legislation will pass, but there wasn't a debate today. She says that right now they are in a position where they do want to have that debate, but they want the time to do that. So that is going to happen this weekend, so students will have to wait just a little bit longer before they can get back to class. Failing to get unanimous support in the legislature Friday, a bill that would end the longest college strike in Ontario's history will have to be hashed out over the weekend.
This is up to the NDP. We could have passed this last night. We could have passed first, second, third reading, everything yesterday. We could have done the same today, and they've shouted it down. So this is totally the NDP, and only the NDP, are blocking the return of students to school.
NDP leader Andrea Horvath saying the back-to-work legislation stomps on workers' rights and that her party will not support it.
I mean, nobody would sign a contract without even looking at it. Nobody would buy a car from a used car salesman, as was said earlier by someone else, without reviewing what that car looked like. 500,000 students remain out of class. More than 12,000 faculty now off the picket line waiting for direction from Queen's Park.
We're required to have a certain number of hours of debate before we vote on the bill. So this is delaying the return.
All of my colleagues from across Ontario have been hearing from parents, grandparents, and students themselves just saying, please, don't let me lose a semester. So we were telling the government they need to do this, but I'm really shocked and dismayed by the actions of the New Democrats today. I think that was a really poor choice, and I think it was really wrong-headed.
Students are expected back in class next week, likely by Tuesday. Now, on Monday was what was hoped for. Advanced Education Minister Deb Matthews tells us that she had heard from the Faculty Association, and they say they need about 24 hours following that legislation being put in place to be able to be prepared for students. Of course, their school year and their semester is going to be heavily condensed, and it's not quite clear what everything is going to look like. Alan?
Shalima Maharaj live at Queen's Park for us, and we're joined now by Ontario NDP leader Andrea Horvath. And Andrea, why delay this back-to-work legislation when you know you can't stop it?
Well, in fact, we had to have a look at it. We did not get a chance to look at the bill. It was tabled today. I have to tell you, I'm excited about the fact that the students are finally going back after 5 weeks of no leadership whatsoever from Kathleen Wynne. She finally decided to get involved yesterday. And again, we know that the students are going to go back on Tuesday likely, faculty on Monday. That's going to happen regardless. But look, nobody would expect a political party to be doing their job properly if they just passed legislation that they haven't even looked at yet, that they haven't even had a chance to read. But, so we're reading that bill now, and tomorrow we're going to debate it, and Sunday we'll debate it, and it will be passed. Not with our support, though. Not with our support, but it will get passed.
But you know, you could have allowed a sitting last night. You could have had it introduced earlier. These are stalling motions. Let's be clear about what you're doing here. You're in an odd predicament here. You can't approve it, but are you actually delaying students getting back into class by what you're doing?
Oh, no, absolutely not. In fact, whether it was dealt with yesterday or today, the bottom line is the faculty would be going back on Monday and the students on Tuesday. But look, I mean, we're doing our jobs. Nobody would expect us to pass legislation without reading it. It's about due diligence. It's about being responsible for the position that you have, which is to read legislation before it gets passed. And that's what we're doing, Alan. And you know what? At the end of the day, New Democrats will not support this legislation, but we do have a responsibility and a right, frankly, to debate what the government has before us. We can't do that if we haven't read it. And so we were not prepared to grease the wheels for the government yesterday. That is true. They wanted to ram this thing through sight unseen and then go home for the weekend. We're prepared to roll up our sleeves, work diligently through the weekend, and get this bill to the place where the government wants it, which is approval. And as a majority government, that's what they're going to get.
Very quickly, because we're almost out of time, but students, union members, those are traditionally NDP supporters. Do you think you lost votes from those people by these delay tactics?
Well, look, I mean, it's been 5 weeks and Kathleen Wynne's done nothing. 5 weeks. I mean, we won't support anti-labor, anti-worker, conservative style legislation. Absolutely not. But we do have to do our jobs here. We can't irresponsibly just pass legislation without even looking at it. I don't think anybody would expect that of us. And so what I'm happy about, though, is that on Tuesday, students will be back in class. On Monday, faculty will be back. And it's unfortunate that Kathleen Wynne did not take her responsibility seriously over the last 5 weeks. She had the authority to get involved with this. She chose not to, and some would wonder if this was a tactic that she used to get us to this terrible position where students have suffered so much over 5 weeks.
All right, Andrea Horvath, leader of the Ontario NDP, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.